Okay.
Shut. Okay.
Shut up, okay?
Shut.
I never imagined that at 67 years old, I would find myself standing on my own doorstep, staring at my belongings piled carelessly next to the azalea bushes I had planted 30 years ago. The Arizona sun beat down on my face as I stood there, still weak from the anesthesia, the surgical wound under my blouse throbbing with each stunned heartbeat. 3 days in the hospital for emergency heart surgery, and this was my welcome home. My fingers trembled as I reached for the handle of my front door, only to find it wouldn't turn. The locks had been changed. I pressed the doorbell, the chime echoing through the house I had paid for with decades of hard work on the federal bench. The door swung open, and my son Everett stood there, a man I hardly recognized anymore. At 42, his face had hardened into something cold and distant, so unlike the boy I had raised alone after his father died. "Mom," he said, no warmth in the word. "I was going to call you. Your things are there." He gestured dismissively toward the pile of suitcases and boxes. "The house is being sold. Cassie and I need the money for our business." The world tilted beneath my feet. "Everett, what are you talking about? This is my house. I just had heart surgery. We've been over this for months. You can't live alone anymore. The doctor said nothing of the sort." My judicial voice slipped out, the one that had silenced countless attorneys in my courtroom. "I spoke with Dr. Chen yesterday. I'm perfectly capable." "Take your things and leave, Mom. We've made arrangements at Sunny Pines. They're expecting you this afternoon." Sunny Pines, the assisted living facility on the edge of town where people went to die surrounded by the smell of industrial cleaner and overcooked vegetables. "I'm not going to any facility. This is my house, Everett. My name is on the deed." His eyes slid away from mine. "Actually, it isn't. Not anymore." The scar on my chest seemed to pulse with fresh pain. I thought of the power of attorney I had signed when I went in for surgery. "A precaution," the lawyer had said, "just in case there were complications." "What have you done?" My voice was barely a whisper. "What needed to be done? Cassie and I are underwater on the business loans. We need capital. The house is worth over $1 million now with the market the way it is." I caught movement behind him. Cassandra, my daughter-in-law, pretending to busy herself in the kitchen, but clearly listening to every word. She'd never liked me. I was too old-fashioned, too strict, too much of a reminder that Everett had come from humble beginnings before he married into her family's money that had apparently run out. "You can't do this." I straightened my back, ignoring the pain. 30 years on the bench had taught me not to show weakness. "This is fraud, Everett. I'll fight this." He sighed, as if I were being unreasonable. "There's nothing to fight. The paperwork is legal. Your signature is on it. Under false pretenses. That's fraud." "Mom, you're making a scene. The neighbors will hear." "Good." I raised my voice. "Let them hear how Judge Marlene Adkins' son threw her out after heart surgery. Let them hear how you're committing elder abuse." His face flushed. "That's enough. Take your things and go. The car service for Sunny Pines will be here in an hour." The door closed in my face. I stood there, the world spinning around me. 30 years I'd served on the federal bench. Respected, feared even. And now I was homeless, betrayed by my own blood. My hand went to my chest, feeling the bandages beneath my blouse. I couldn't afford to collapse here. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction. I had nowhere to go. My friends were scattered, most retired to Florida or other warm places. My sister lived in Seattle, too far to reach today. I had savings, of course, but no access to them at the moment. My purse contained only the basics the hospital had returned to me. I looked up and down the street of the upscale Tucson neighborhood where I'd lived for decades. Most of the neighbors were new, young families who barely nodded when they passed me walking to get the mail. But across the street, Luisa Delgado's modest house stood as it had for the 20 years since she'd moved in after her husband died. We weren't close. Occasional waves, Christmas cards, brief conversations about the weather or neighborhood gossip. But she had always been kind, and I had nowhere else to turn. The walk across the street seemed longer than any walk to the bench had ever been. My legs were unsteady as I made my way up her path and pressed the doorbell. The door opened, and Luisa's eyes widened. At 72, she was still spry, her silver-streaked black hair pulled back in a practical bun. her face creased with the lines of a life fully lived. "Judge Adkins? Are you all right? You look— I'm sorry to bother you, Louisa," I said, my voice finally breaking, "but I need help." Louisa's kitchen smelled of coffee and cinnamon, a warm contrast to the sterile hospital and the cruel dismissal from my own home. She listened in shocked silence as I explained what had happened, her weathered hands wrapped around a ceramic mug. "Dios mío," she whispered when I finished. "Your own son. After surgery." I nodded, unable to speak. The humiliation burned worse than the physical pain. "You will stay here," she said decisively. "I have the spare room. My daughter visited last month and made it up nice. It's yours until you figure things out." "Louisa, I couldn't impose—" "It's not imposing when it's offered freely." She pushed a mug of coffee toward me. "My Carlos would rise from his grave if I turned away a neighbor in need, especially one who helped us with that property tax appeal years ago." I had forgotten that. A small kindness, using my legal knowledge to help Louisa navigate a bureaucratic mistake that had nearly doubled her property taxes. "Thank you," I said simply, too exhausted and grateful to argue. "Now, about your things." Louisa stood, surprisingly formidable for her small frame. "We should get them before that boy of yours decides to throw them away, too." We made 3 trips across the street, Louisa insisting on carrying the lighter bags despite my protests. My son and his wife remained inside, blinds drawn. Cowards. By sunset, I was installed in Louisa's spare room, surrounded by hastily packed belongings that represented the fragments of my life that Everett had deemed unworthy of stealing. Mostly clothes, some books, photo albums, my mother's silver. No furniture, no artwork, none of the valuable antiques I'd collected over the years. As I unpacked a photo of Everett's law school graduation, me beaming with pride beside him, my hand on his shoulder, I felt something shift inside me. The shock and despair began to crystallize into something harder, more focused. I placed the photo face down in a drawer. They had made a serious mistake, my son and his grasping wife. They had forgotten who I was. I hadn't spent 30 years delivering justice from the federal bench to roll over now. They had chosen the wrong woman to betray. The next morning, I awoke disoriented, momentarily confused by the unfamiliar ceiling above me. Then, the previous day's events crashed back, along with the persistent ache in my chest. Louisa had already left for her volunteer shift at the community center, but she'd left coffee brewing and a note with her phone number and a spare key. Simple kindnesses that brought unexpected tears to my eyes. I needed to get moving, to make plans. First, I called my bank to freeze my accounts, explaining there might be fraudulent activity. Then I called my doctor to explain my change of address and situation. Finally, the call I dreaded most, to my sister Margaret in Seattle. "They did what?" Margaret's voice rose in outrage. "That ungrateful little—" "I know," I said, cutting off what would surely be a creative string of expletives. My older sister had never approved of how I'd spoiled Everett after Richard died. "I need a loan, Meg, just until I can access my accounts and figure out what Everett has done." "Of course. I'm transferring $5,000 right now. Do you need me to come down there?" "No, you have your hands full with the grandkids." Margaret was raising her daughter's children after a messy divorce. "I just need to get back on my feet. Then I'm going to deal with Everett and Cassandra." "What will you do?" "I'm not sure yet, but they're going to regret this." After hanging up, I used Louisa's tablet to research my options. As a former federal judge, I had resources most people in my situation wouldn't. Connections to the best attorneys in Arizona, knowledge of the law, and a reputation that still carried weight. By noon, I had an appointment with Harold Tucker, a semi-retired attorney who specialized in elder law and property disputes. I had presided over several of his cases years ago and remembered him as shrewd and thorough. I also had a text message from my 16-year-old granddaughter Zoe. "Grandma, are you okay? Dad said you moved to Sunny Pines, but when I called there, they said you weren't a resident. What's going on?" "I'm worried." My heart clenched. Zoe, the only bright spot in Everett's household, smart as a whip, kind-hearted, with none of her mother's materialism or her father's weakness of character. "I'm safe, sweetheart," I texted back. "Staying with a neighbor for now. Your father and I had a disagreement about the house. Don't worry about me. Focus on your studies." Her response was immediate. "What kind of disagreement? Dad's been acting weird. Can I come see you?" I hesitated. Dragging Zoe into this ugliness seemed wrong, but she was perceptive enough to know something was seriously amiss. Not right now, honey. Things are complicated. I'll explain everything soon. 3 dots appeared and disappeared several times before her reply came through. I think I understand more than you realize, Grandma. Dad and Mom have been fighting about money for months. Be careful. A warning from my own granddaughter. What had been happening in that house while I was focused on my health issues? The doorbell rang, interrupting my thoughts. I made my way carefully to the door, expecting perhaps a package for Louisa. Instead, I found Cassandra standing on the porch, her artificially plumped lips pressed into a thin line of disapproval. She wore designer sunglasses that probably cost more than most people's monthly mortgage payments, her blonde highlights gleaming in the Arizona sun. "Marlene," she said, not bothering with Judge Adkins or even Mrs., as she had for the 2 decades of her marriage to my son. "We need to talk about your options." I crossed my arms. "Do we? I think my son made my options quite clear yesterday." She glanced around, clearly uncomfortable having this conversation on Louisa's porch where any neighbor might see. "May I come in? This isn't my house to invite you into." "Fine." She shifted, adjusting her oversized handbag. "The administrator at Sunny Pines is expecting you. We've paid the first month's fee as a courtesy. If you go quietly, we'll ensure your monthly expenses are covered." "How generous of you to offer me a portion of what you're stealing." Her jaw tightened. "Don't be dramatic. The house sale will barely cover our debts. Everett's business. Everett's business, not mine. I didn't co-sign his loans or agree to fund his failures. He's your son. Yes, my greatest disappointment, as it turns out." That hit home. Her face flushed beneath her perfect makeup. "You need to be reasonable. At your age, with your health. My age and health are not your concern. They are when you're being stubborn and putting your recovery at risk." The doctor said. "What doctor?" "Not Dr. Chen. I spoke with her yesterday before discharge. She cleared me to return home with minimal assistance for the first week." Cassandra's eyes shifted away. "Another lie, then." "Here's what's going to happen," I said, my courtroom voice returning. "I have an appointment with Harold Tucker this afternoon to discuss the fraudulent transfer of my property. I will be filing police reports for theft, as there are numerous valuable items missing from the belongings you so graciously dumped on the lawn, and I will be contacting the state bar to discuss Everett's fitness to practice law, given his apparent comfort with elder abuse and fraud." Her face went white. "You wouldn't." "I absolutely would. Now get off this porch before I call the police and report you for harassment." She took a step back. "You're making a huge mistake. We're family. Family doesn't steal from family, Cassandra. Now your choices are to leave voluntarily, or I'll ask one of those nice officers in the patrol car down the street to escort you away." There was no patrol car, but Cassandra didn't bother to check. She turned on her expensive heel and stalked back to her Mercedes SUV, fumbling with her keys in her anger. As she drove away, I let out a shaky breath and leaned against the doorframe. The confrontation had drained what little energy I had. But it had also crystallized something important. This wasn't just about getting my house back. This was about making sure Everett and Cassandra faced consequences for what they'd done. They thought I was a weak old woman they could discard. They were about to learn how terribly wrong they were. The office of Tucker Legal Services was modest but well appointed, tucked into a renovated bungalow on the edge of the downtown district. Harold Tucker himself had aged well in the 15 years since he'd last appeared in my courtroom, still lean and sharp-eyed, though his once dark hair had gone completely silver. "Judge Adkins," he said, rising from behind his desk when his assistant showed me in. "It's an honor to see you again, though I wish it were under better circumstances. Thank you for seeing me on short notice, Harold. And it's just Marlene now. I'm not on the bench anymore." "You'll always be Judge Adkins to those of us who appeared before you," he said with a smile, gesturing to a comfortable chair. "Now tell me what's happened." I laid out the situation methodically, as if presenting evidence to a jury. The power of attorney I'd signed before surgery, the unauthorized transfer of my property, the theft of my possessions, the attempted coercion into assisted living. Harold took notes, his expression darkening as the story unfolded. "This is unconscionable," he said when I finished, "and unfortunately, not uncommon. Elder abuse is a growing problem, even, perhaps especially, within families. What are my options? He leaned back, tapping his pen against his notepad. Several, each with advantages and disadvantages. We can file for an emergency injunction to prevent the sale of the house while we challenge the property transfer. We can bring criminal charges for fraud and elder abuse. We can sue civilly for damages. And realistically, given that my son is an attorney and likely covered his tracks? Harold's eyes met mine. Realistically, this will be a fight, but you have significant advantages. Your reputation is impeccable. Your medical records will show you were of sound mind and body, enough to live independently. And frankly, a jury will be deeply sympathetic to a mother betrayed by her son immediately after heart surgery. I want it all, Harold. The house, my possessions. And I want them to face consequences. Real ones. That's what I'd expect from the Iron Judge of the Ninth Circuit, he said, using the nickname I'd earned during my tougher years on the bench. We'll start with the injunction today. I know Judge Martinez is on the rotation for emergency petitions, and she clerked for you, if I recall correctly. She did, though I don't expect special treatment. Of course not, but she'll ensure the petition gets a fair hearing. He made a note. Now, for immediate concerns. Your belongings? Some with me at a neighbor's home. The valuable items, artwork, antiques, my electronics, are still in the house, presumably. We'll include those in the injunction and demand a full inventory. He paused. And your financial situation? Did your son empty your accounts as well? I froze them this morning, but I haven't had time to check balances. Harold nodded. We should do that now, if you don't mind. It will help us understand what we're dealing with. He slid his laptop across the desk, and I logged into my bank accounts. The main checking account, where my pension was deposited, showed a balance of $341.17. Last week, it had held over $14,000. He cleaned it out, I said, my voice flat. The savings account, too. Nearly $30,000 gone. Harold's expression was grim. We'll add that to the filing. Have you checked your investment accounts? My retirement portfolio was substantial. I'd been prudent with money throughout my career. With trembling fingers, I logged into the brokerage account. Still there, I breathed. He didn't get to these. Yet. Good. We'll make sure he doesn't. Harold took back his laptop. Judge Adkins. Marlene, I want you to know we're going to fix this. It might take time, but your son and daughter-in-law have made a series of catastrophic legal errors. They will regret it. For the first time since seeing my belongings on the lawn, I felt something close to hope. Thank you, Harold. Don't thank me yet. This will get uglier before it gets better. Are you prepared for that? A public legal battle with your own son? I thought of Everett's cold eyes as he told me to leave. Of Cassandra's smug certainty that I would quietly disappear into Sunny Pines. Of the life and home they thought they could steal from me. Absolutely, I said. Let's begin. As I left Harold's office, my phone chimed with a text from an unknown number. Judge Adkins, this is Vivian Reed from Desert Palms Medical Center. I heard about your situation through Dr. Chen. If you need work while sorting things out, the community clinic needs an administrator. Flexible hours, decent pay. Let me know if you're interested. Vivian Reed. I searched my memory and recalled a capable nurse who had testified in a medical malpractice case years ago. I hadn't realized she remembered me. I texted back, "Thank you, Vivian. I may take you up on that. Let's talk tomorrow." Stepping into the bright Arizona afternoon, I felt the weight of the last 24 hours pressing down on me. But beneath the exhaustion and pain was something stronger. A steely resolve that had served me well on the bench and would serve me now. Everett and Cassandra thought they were dealing with a frail old woman they could discard. They were about to discover just how wrong they were. My son had declared war. Fine. But he had forgotten an important fact. I never lost a battle in my courtroom, and I didn't intend to start now. The community clinic where Vivian Reed worked was housed in a converted strip mall on the less affluent side of Tucson. The waiting room was already half full when I arrived for my interview the next morning, mostly elderly patients and young mothers with children in tow. The walls were painted a cheerful yellow, artwork from local schoolchildren taped up alongside health education posters in English and Spanish. It was a far cry from the federal courthouse where I'd spent my career, or the upscale medical offices I typically frequented as a patient. Vivian spotted me immediately, her face lighting up with recognition. At 65, she remained striking, tall and elegant, with close-cropped silver hair and shrewd dark eyes that missed nothing. She'd been an exceptional witness in that long-ago malpractice case, unflappable under aggressive cross-examination. "Judge Adkins," she said, crossing the waiting room to greet me. "Thank you for coming." "Please, it's Marlene now," I said, shaking her offered hand. "I appreciate the opportunity." She led me through a security door into a cramped office cluttered with medical journals and grant applications. "Dr. Chen called me yesterday," she explained, settling behind the desk. "She was concerned about your discharge situation. We've known each other for years. I used to be charge nurse on her unit before I moved into community health." "I see." I wasn't sure how I felt about my personal situation becoming gossip among medical professionals, but I supposed it didn't matter now. "And you need an administrator?" "Desperately," Vivian said with a rueful smile. "Our previous office manager retired last month. We're a non-profit, so the pay isn't spectacular, but it's honest work. 20 hours a week to start, more if you want it. Mostly scheduling, billing, keeping the various bureaucracies off our backs. Skills I imagine you honed to perfection on the bench." She was right. Running a federal courtroom had required precise administrative abilities alongside legal knowledge. 30 years of managing dockets, court staff, and the egos of attorneys had taught me efficiency and organization. "When would you need me to start?" "Yesterday," Vivian laughed, "but tomorrow would work. I know you're recovering, so we can be flexible with your schedule." I considered the offer. The salary she mentioned wouldn't replace my pension, but it would provide immediate income while I fought to regain access to my accounts. More importantly, it would give me purpose, a reason to get up in the morning beyond my legal battle with Everett. "I'll take it," I said. "But I should be transparent. I'm currently involved in a legal dispute with my son over property theft. It could become messy." Vivian waved a dismissive hand. "Half our staff is involved in some form of family drama. As long as you can do the job, your personal life is your business." She paused, studying me. "Though if you need a character witness, I'd be happy to testify. I still remember how fair you were in that Carson malpractice case. You found for the hospital but made sure the family got help with ongoing care costs." I had forgotten that detail, one of hundreds of cases I'd presided over. It was oddly touching that she remembered. "Thank you, Vivian. That might be necessary." We spent the next hour reviewing the clinic's systems, outdated but functional, and my responsibilities. By noon, I was officially employed for the first time since my retirement from the bench 5 years ago. As I left the clinic, my phone rang with Harold Tucker's number. "We've got the emergency hearing scheduled for tomorrow at 2 p.m., he said, without preamble. "Judge Martinez expedited it based on the medical circumstances. Your son has been served notice." That was fast. I emphasized the time-sensitive nature, given rumors that the house was already being shown to potential buyers. My stomach dropped. "Already? It's been 2 days." "Apparently, they had the listing ready to go before you even returned from the hospital. Further evidence of premeditation." Cold fury washed through me. They had planned this, waiting until I was vulnerable. "Will I need to appear?" I asked, calculating the energy reserves needed for a court appearance so soon after surgery. "Yes, but it should be brief. Judge Martinez will want to hear directly from you." "I'll be there." As I ended the call, another came in, Zoe's number. I hesitated before answering. My granddaughter was perceptive and determined, qualities I admired but which complicated the current situation. "Grandma, are you okay?" Her voice was pitched low, almost a whisper. "I'm fine, sweetheart." "Why are you whispering?" "I'm in the bathroom at home. Dad and Mom are fighting downstairs. About you. About money. It sounds bad." My heart clenched. "I'm sorry you're caught in the middle of this. Dad got served some papers today." He threw a glass against the wall. A pause. "Grandma, what's really going on? Mom said you're having mental problems because of your medications, that you're imagining things." Anger flared bright and hot. "That's absolutely false, Zoe. I'm perfectly sound of mind. Your father and Cassandra tried to steal my house and my savings while I was recovering from heart surgery. The papers were a notice of an emergency court hearing tomorrow." Silence on the line. Then, I knew they were lying. "Dad's been weird ever since you went into the hospital, cleaning out your office, going through your papers." "Zoe, listen to me. Don't confront them about this. It's not your battle, and I don't want you in the crossfire. But it's wrong, what they're doing. Yes, it is, and there will be consequences. But you're 16, and you still have to live in that house. Promise me you'll stay out of it, at least directly. A long sigh. Fine. But can I at least see you? They told me you were in Sunny Pines, but I called, and they said you weren't registered there. Smart girl. Despite everything, pride warmed my chest. I'm staying with Mrs. Delgado across the street for now, but let's meet somewhere else. The Central Library, maybe, after school tomorrow? I have debate club until 5. Perfect. I'll meet you at the cafe next door at 5:30. Okay, she paused. I've got to go. Mom's calling for me. Be careful, Zoe. I love you. Love you too, Grandma. The call ended, leaving me with a complex tangle of emotions. Protective instinct for my granddaughter warred with fury at my son and daughter-in-law for putting her in this position, forcing her to sneak around to check on my welfare. I made my way back to Luisa's house, exhaustion settling into my bones. The surgery, the betrayal, the constant strategic thinking, all of it taxed my recovering body. But I couldn't afford to slow down. Not with tomorrow's hearing approaching. Luisa was home when I arrived, chopping vegetables for what smelled like her famous pozole. How did the job interview go? She asked as I sank into a kitchen chair. I start tomorrow. Part-time administrative work at a community clinic. She nodded approvingly. Good. Keeping busy is important. When my Carlos died, working at the community center saved me. I also have a court hearing tomorrow, emergency injunction against Everett selling the house. Luisa's knife paused mid-chop. So soon? That's good, yes? If the judge grants it. My former clerk is presiding, though that's no guarantee of success. You need rest before court. And food. She gestured toward the pot, simmering on the stove. My mother's recipe. Good for strength. I smiled, touched by her practical concern. Thank you, Luisa, for everything. She waved dismissively, but I caught the pleased expression before she turned back to her chopping. After dinner, I retreated to the spare room to prepare for the hearing. As a judge, I'd presided over countless property disputes, but being the plaintiff felt disorienting. I wrote out my account of events in clear, chronological order, focusing on facts rather than emotions. The law would care about timelines, evidence, and documentation, not my feelings of betrayal. I fell asleep surrounded by notes, dreaming of courtrooms where I couldn't find my gavel and defendants who wore my son's face. The Pima County Courthouse stood imposing against the clear blue sky, its Spanish colonial revival architecture a familiar sight from my days on the bench. I'd entered this building thousands of times, but never as a plaintiff seeking justice for myself. Harold met me at the entrance, immaculate in a charcoal suit, carrying a leather briefcase that probably cost more than my first car. Ready? He asked, offering his arm for support as we climbed the stairs. The gesture might have annoyed me from someone else, but my chest wound was aching today, and I accepted gratefully. As I'll ever be. Inside, we found courtroom 3B and took our places at the plaintiff's table. Minutes later, the door swung open, and Everett entered with his attorney, Spencer Williams, a slick corporate lawyer I'd reprimanded more than once for aggressive tactics that skirted ethical boundaries. Everett didn't meet my eyes, but I studied him openly. My son looked terrible, his normally neat appearance disheveled, dark circles beneath his eyes. Good. Let him lose sleep over what he'd done. Judge Elena Martinez entered, and the familiar call of "All rise" echoed through the courtroom. At 45, she'd grown into the promise I'd seen when she clerked for me 15 years ago, composed and sharp-eyed behind her glasses, her dark hair now streaked with early silver at the temples. "Be seated," she said, adjusting her robes as she took the bench. "This is case number CV 2025-143627, Adkins v. Adkins, an emergency petition for injunctive relief." Her gaze swept the courtroom, lingering briefly on me with the faintest hint of recognition before settling into professional neutrality. "I've reviewed the petition and supporting documents. This is troubling, to say the least." She turned to Everett's table. "Mr. Williams, your client is accused of using a medical power of attorney to transfer property and assets from his mother without consent immediately following her heart surgery. Do you wish to respond to these allegations?" Williams rose smoothly. "Yes, Your Honor. These transfers were undertaken with Mrs. Adkins' full knowledge and consent, as part of estate planning discussions that have been ongoing for months. My client has documentation of his mother's expressed wishes to downsize and move to assisted living due to her declining health. The timing of the transfer, while unfortunate, was necessitated by an advantageous market opportunity. Declining health? Judge Martinez raised an eyebrow. I have before me an affidavit from Dr. Chen, Mrs. Adkins' cardiologist, stating that while she required surgery for an acute condition, her overall health is excellent for her age, with no cognitive impairments or limitations that would prevent independent living. Williams barely missed a beat. With respect, Your Honor, a cardiologist's assessment doesn't capture the full picture of an elderly patient's ability to maintain a large property alone. I see. And the $44,000 transferred from Mrs. Adkins' accounts to your client's business accounts the day after her surgery. Was that also part of estate planning? Williams glanced at Everett, whose face had gone pale. Clearly he hadn't expected us to trace the money so quickly. Your Honor, those funds were transferred to cover expenses related to Mrs. Adkins' care and the maintenance of the property pending sale. Judge Martinez's expression suggested she found this explanation as unconvincing as I did. Mr. Tucker, do you wish to respond? She asked, turning to Harold. Harold rose. Yes, Your Honor. The respondent's claims are demonstrably false. Judge Adkins? Mrs. Adkins, Williams interjected. She's retired. Harold's gaze could have frozen lava. Judge Adkins, as a retired federal jurist, is entitled to the honorific by custom and courtesy counselor. As I was saying, Judge Adkins has extensive documentation contradicting the respondent's claims, including text messages from the day before her discharge where her son confirmed she would be returning to her home. We also have statements from her medical team clearing her for independent living with minimal temporary assistance. Judge Martinez nodded. Judge Adkins, I'd like to hear from you directly. I stood, ignoring the twinge in my chest. Thank you, Your Honor. I want to be absolutely clear. At no point did I agree to sell my home, transfer ownership to my son, or move to assisted living. The power of attorney was signed with the explicit understanding that it would only be used if I was incapacitated during or after surgery. I was never incapacitated. And when you returned home from the hospital, I found the locks changed and my belongings on the lawn. My son informed me that the house was being sold and I should go to Sunny Pines Assisted Living, where arrangements had supposedly been made for me. I later confirmed with Sunny Pines that no such arrangements existed. Judge Martinez's expression darkened. Mr. Adkins, is this true? Everett finally looked up, his face a mask of righteous indignation that might have been convincing to someone who hadn't raised him and recognized his tells. Your Honor, my mother and I discussed her living situation extensively. She agreed it was time to move somewhere with care available. She's misremembering due to the stress of surgery. I see. Judge Martinez tapped her pen against her notepad. Mr. Williams, does your client have any documentation of these discussions? Written agreements? Emails? Texts? Williams shifted uncomfortably. The conversations were primarily verbal, Your Honor. How convenient. Judge Martinez's dry tone made it clear what she thought of this claim. She shuffled through the papers before her. I have here bank records showing that within hours of Judge Adkins's surgery, Mr. Adkins transferred property worth approximately $1.2 million and liquidated accounts totaling $44,000. The timing alone is highly suspicious. She looked up, her decision evident in her expression. I'm granting the emergency injunction. The property transfer is suspended pending full review, the house is not to be shown or listed for sale, and the respondent is to provide a full accounting of all assets removed from the property or financial accounts within 48 hours. Williams began to object, but she cut him off with a raised hand. Additionally, Mr. Williams, I'm ordering the immediate return of $44,000 to Judge Adkins' accounts. If your client fails to comply within 24 hours, I'll consider additional sanctions. This case will proceed to a full hearing next month, where I expect complete financial disclosure from the respondent. She fixed Everett with a stern look. Mr. Adkins, as an officer of the court yourself, you should be extremely concerned about your professional standing right now. Elder abuse and financial exploitation carry potential criminal penalties alongside civil liability. I strongly suggest you reconsider your position." She banged her gavel. "We're adjourned. The parties are to return on October 15th at 9 a.m. for the full hearing." As we gathered our papers, I caught Everett staring at me, a mixture of anger and fear on his face. I met his gaze steadily until he looked away. "Round one to us," Harold murmured as we exited the courtroom. "Judge Martinez didn't pull any punches." "She never did," I replied. "Even as a clerk, she was direct to a fault." In the hallway, Spencer Williams approached, positioning himself between me and Everett, who lingered several paces back. "Judge Adkins," he said, his tone conciliatory. "My client would like to discuss settlement options." "Would he?" I kept my voice level. Interesting how quickly his certainty about my declining health has evaporated. Williams grimaced. "The court's preliminary ruling suggests a negotiated resolution might be in everyone's best interest, to avoid unpleasantness." The unpleasantness began when my son changed my locks and threw my belongings on the lawn, counselor. I stepped around him to address Everett directly. "If you want to talk settlement, return every penny you took, move out of my house, and deliver a complete inventory of my possessions. Then we can discuss what happens next." Everett's face flushed. "Mom, be reasonable. We can work this out without what? Without consequences? Without the Arizona Bar Association hearing about your conduct? Without your clients discovering you commit fraud against your own mother?" He paled. "You wouldn't. Try me." I turned back to Harold. "I believe we're done here." Outside the courthouse, I sagged against a pillar, the adrenaline of confrontation fading into exhaustion. Harold watched me with concern. "Are you all right?" "Just tired. It's been an eventful few days." "You should rest. We've won the first skirmish, bought ourselves time." I nodded. "I start the new job this afternoon. Then I'm meeting my granddaughter. That's a lot for someone recovering from surgery." "I'll manage." I straightened, adjusting my jacket. "What's our next move?" "We document everything in the house, assuming they comply with the order to let you in. We trace every financial transaction Everett made with your money, and we prepare for either serious settlement talks or a full hearing. And if they try to hide assets?" Harold's smile was wolfish. "Then Judge Martinez will make their lives exceptionally difficult. She doesn't suffer fools, as you well know." We parted with a plan to speak again tomorrow after Everett's deadline to return the funds. As I walked to the clinic for my first afternoon of work, I found myself analyzing the courtroom encounter, dissecting Everett's reactions. He'd been shocked by how quickly we'd traced the money, unprepared for Judge Martinez's skepticism, rattled by her reference to his professional standing. There was leverage there. My son feared disgrace, feared losing his law license more than he feared losing his mother. Useful information for the battles ahead. The community clinic was busy when I arrived, the waiting room fuller than it had been during my interview. Vivian greeted me with evident relief. "Thank God you're here. The scheduling system crashed, and we have 40 patients waiting." "Show me the problem," I said, setting aside thoughts of Everett and courtrooms. This, at least, was a challenge I could solve immediately. The afternoon passed in a blur of administrative firefighting. The scheduling system was antiquated but fixable. The billing backlog was substantial but manageable with proper organization. By closing time, I had a clear plan for bringing order to the chaos and had already implemented the first steps. Vivian watched with approval as I streamlined the intake process, reducing patient wait times by nearly 20 minutes. "You're a natural," she said as we locked up. "I figured you would be. Running a courtroom can't be that different from running a medical office, both full of egos and paperwork." I smiled, surprised by how good it felt to be useful again. "Thank you for the opportunity. It's grounding to have meaningful work right now. The job's yours as long as you want it. Though I suspect once you get your house and money back, you might have other plans." "One day at a time," I said. "Speaking of which, I need to go meet my granddaughter." The cafe next to the library was crowded with students, laptops open and headphones in place. I spotted Zoe immediately, her dark curly hair, so like her grandfather's, pulled back in a careless ponytail as she hunched over a textbook, highlighter in hand. At 16, she was already showing signs of the woman she would become, serious, focused, with a quiet intensity that reminded me painfully of Everett before ambition and Cassandra had corrupted his better nature. "Zoe," I said softly, sliding into the chair across from her. She looked up, her face lighting with relief. "Grandma!" She reached across to squeeze my hand. "You look okay. I was worried." "I'm fine. Recovering well." I studied her face, noting the shadows beneath her eyes. "How are things at home?" She glanced around before answering, lowering her voice. "Bad. Dad's freaking out. He was on the phone with his lawyer for hours last night. Mom keeps saying you've lost your mind, that you're vindictive and trying to ruin them. And what do you think?" "I think they're lying." Her gaze was direct, unflinching. "I saw the papers from court. I know what they did." I sighed. "You shouldn't be involved in this, Zoe." "I already am involved. It's my family falling apart." She closed her textbook. "The hearing today, how did it go?" "The judge granted the injunction. Your father can't sell the house, and he has to return the money he took." Relief flickered across her face. "Good, that's good." She hesitated. "Grandma, there's something else you should know. Mom's been selling your stuff." My heart clenched. "What?" "Your antiques, some of your jewelry. I saw her meeting with some dealer at the house yesterday. They were loading boxes into his van." Fury rose like bile in my throat. Not just theft, then, but the systematic liquidation of my possessions. Family heirlooms, treasured collections, memories in physical form. "Did you see what was taken?" "Some of your silver pieces, the jade collection from the cabinet in your study, and—" She hesitated. "Grandpa's watch collection, the one in the special case. Richard's watches. My late husband's most prized possessions, the vintage timepieces he'd lovingly collected over decades. Pieces I'd preserved for Everett, for Zoe eventually." My expression must have revealed my devastation, because Zoe reached for my hand again. "I'm sorry, Grandma. I tried to stop them. Mom said they were just being appraised." I took a deep breath, forcing down the rage. "It's not your fault, sweetheart, but I need you to do something for me. Take pictures of anything else valuable in the house, discreetly. Don't put yourself at risk. But if you can document what's still there, it will help with the legal case." She nodded eagerly. "I already started. I've been using my phone when they're not looking." My clever, brave girl. "Send them to me, but be careful. Don't let your parents see you doing it." "I won't." She bit her lip. "What's going to happen now?" "I'm fighting to get the house back and everything they took. It might get messy." I squeezed her hand. "But I want you to focus on school, on your future. Don't let this derail your plans." "How can I pretend everything's normal when they're stealing from you?" "Not pretending. Persevering. That's what our family does, Zoe. We face hard truths, and we keep going." I met her eyes. "Your grandfather used to say that integrity isn't just about doing the right thing when everyone's watching. It's about doing the right thing even when it costs you something." Her eyes welled with tears. "I miss him. I wish he was here." "So do I, sweetheart." My own eyes stung. "But we have each other, and we're going to get through this." We talked for another half hour, about her debate team, her college aspirations, normal things that had nothing to do with betrayal or courtrooms. When we parted, she hugged me fiercely, as if afraid I might disappear. "I'll keep sending pictures," she whispered, "and I'll call you tomorrow." "Be careful," I cautioned again. "Your parents can check your phone." She smiled grimly. "They think I don't know about their monitoring app. I have a second phone they don't know about, for emergencies." I shook my head, caught between admiration and concern for her resourcefulness. Smart girl, but still be careful. As I watched her walk away, back straight and head high despite everything, I felt my resolve crystallize into something diamond-hard and unbreakable. This wasn't just about justice for myself anymore. It was about showing Zoe that decency still mattered, that actions had consequences, that the law could protect the vulnerable, that her grandmother, who had once sent men to prison and decided multi-million-dollar disputes from the bench, was still a force to be reckoned with. Everett had tried to erase me, to reduce me to a problem to be warehoused at Sunny Pines. Instead, he had awakened something he would soon regret. The judge who had once been known for showing no mercy to those who abused power or preyed on the vulnerable. The Iron Judge was back in session, and her own son was about to face justice. Adapting to life at Luisa's house while working at the clinic quickly became my new normal. Each morning I reviewed legal documents Harold sent over before heading to the clinic, where the chaos of healthcare administration provided a strange comfort. The problems there were straightforward, solvable with organization and firmness, unlike the tangled web of betrayal I was navigating in my personal life. 2 weeks after the injunction hearing, Harold called as I was finishing my shift. "The financial forensics are back," he said without preamble. "It's worse than we thought." I stepped outside to take the call, the Arizona heat hitting me like a physical wall. "Tell me, Everett didn't just take the $44,000 from your accounts. Over the past 6 months, he's been systematically transferring funds, small amounts, irregular intervals, designed to avoid triggering alerts." My stomach dropped. "How much?" "Nearly $120,000 total. He's been using your accounts like a personal ATM since you gave him that power of attorney for the surgery." I closed my eyes, leaning against the stucco wall of the clinic. Can we trace where the money went? That's the other problem. Much of it was transferred to accounts we can't easily track, some to offshore entities, classic money laundering techniques. The implications were staggering. "Are you saying my son is involved in something criminal beyond stealing from me?" "I'm saying the pattern of financial activity suggests someone who knows exactly how to hide money from authorities. Whether that's to evade taxes, hide assets from creditors, or something worse." Harold paused. "We need to consider involving law enforcement at this point." The thought of my son in criminal court, not as an attorney, but as a defendant, sent a wave of complicated emotions through me. Anger, grief, and beneath it all, a steely determination to see justice done, regardless of blood ties. "Do what's necessary," I said finally. "I want everything back, and I want him to face consequences. The fact that he's my son doesn't change that." "There's more," Harold continued. "Your granddaughter's documentation has been invaluable. Based on the photos she's provided, we estimate Everett and Cassandra have sold at least $200,000 worth of your possessions. The jade collection alone was valued at $45,000 in your last insurance appraisal. Richard's watches, my mother's silver, treasures accumulated over a lifetime, casually liquidated by my son and his wife. Have they complied with the court order to return my funds?" "Partially. They've returned $30,000 of the $44,000 Judge Martinez ordered repaid. They claim the remaining $14,000 was used for property maintenance, but haven't provided documentation." "So they're in contempt?" "Yes, I filed the motion. We have a hearing next week." Harold cleared his throat. "There's one more thing. Spencer Williams reached out this morning. They want to discuss settlement again." "What are they offering?" "They propose returning the house to you, but want you to drop all other claims regarding the missing funds and possessions. Essentially, they keep what they've already taken in exchange for not fighting over the property anymore." I snorted. "Absolutely not. They've stolen hundreds of thousands from me. The house is already mine. The court made that clear." That's what I told them. Williams hinted they might be willing to offer more, but wanted to gauge your initial reaction. My reaction is that they can return everything they've stolen, or we can let Judge Martinez and possibly the district attorney decide their fate. After the call, I sat in my car, staring at the clinic's weathered sign. The comfortable life I'd built over decades, the beautiful house filled with memories, the secure retirement, the dignity of my position in the community, all of it upended in the space of a few weeks. Yet alongside the loss was something unexpected, a sense of renewal. The work at the clinic was rewarding in ways my later years on the bench had not been. The friendship with Louisa was evolving into a genuine bond, our evenings spent sharing stories over dinner in her cozy kitchen. And there was Zoe, my brave granddaughter, whose moral compass pointed true despite her parents' corrupt example. I started the car, but instead of heading to Louisa's, I drove toward my neighborhood, toward the house that was legally mine again, but still occupied by my son and his wife. I hadn't been back since that first awful day, but something pulled me there now, a need to see it with my own eyes. I parked across the street, studying the Spanish-style home I'd shared with Richard during our brief marriage, and where I'd raised Everett after Richard's sudden death. The landscaping was already showing signs of neglect. The roses needed pruning, the lawn had brown patches. Cassandra had never appreciated the garden. As I watched, a van pulled into the driveway, Desert Antiquities emblazoned on its side. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. More of my possessions being carted away, despite the court order. I reached for my phone to call Harold, but before I could, the front door opened. Cassandra emerged, elegantly dressed as always, directing two men carrying what looked like my grandmother's mahogany sideboard, a piece that had survived the journey from Ireland during the potato famine, passed down through generations of women in my family. Without conscious thought, I was out of the car and striding across the street. "Stop right there," I called, my judicial voice carrying across the lawn. "That furniture is subject to a court order." Cassandra whirled, her expression shifting from shock to calculation in an instant. "Marlene, what an unpleasant surprise." The movers hesitated, looking between us uncertainly. "Put that down immediately," I told them. "That piece belongs to me and is protected by court injunction. Moving it constitutes contempt of court and possibly grand theft." "Don't be ridiculous," Cassandra scoffed, but I could see the flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. "This is family property. We're simply rearranging—" "That sideboard belonged to my grandmother, who brought it from County Cork in 1847. It has never been family property. It's my personal property, documented in my household insurance for the past 40 years. I turned to the movers. "If you remove this piece, you'll be participating in a criminal act." "I'd be happy to provide the case number and Judge Martinez's contact information if you'd like to verify my claims." The men carefully lowered the sideboard to the driveway, exchanging glances. "Lady, we don't want any trouble," one said. "We just take what the client tells us to take." "I understand. But I'm informing you now that removing anything from this house violates a court order issued 2 weeks ago." I pulled out my phone. "I'm calling my attorney now, and then the police. I suggest you gentlemen wait here until they arrive." Cassandra's composure cracked. "You sanctimonious bitch. You won't be satisfied until you've ruined us completely. You and my son made your choices, Cassandra. Theft, fraud, selling family heirlooms that never belonged to you." I met her gaze steadily. "I'm simply ensuring you face the consequences." Harold answered on the second ring, and I briefly explained the situation. He promised to call the police and head over immediately. "This isn't over," Cassandra hissed as I ended the call. "You have no idea what you're up against." "I think I do. A desperate couple with mounting debts, willing to steal from an elderly woman, from family, to maintain their lifestyle." I gestured to her designer outfit. "How much did that outfit cost, Cassandra? How many of my possessions did you sell to pay for it?" Her face contorted with rage, but before she could respond, a police cruiser pulled into the cul-de-sac, followed closely by Everett's BMW. The next hour unfolded like a carefully choreographed dance. The police officers, initially skeptical, became significantly more attentive when I identified myself as Judge Adkins and presented the court documents Harold had emailed to my phone. Their respect was palpable once they understood who I was, a reminder of the position I'd once held. Everett arrived in the midst of this, his face ashen when he realized what was happening. He tried to pull rank as an attorney, but the officers were unimpressed. "Sir, you're in potential violation of a court order," the senior officer explained patiently. "We're documenting the items being removed from the property. Whether that constitutes criminal theft or contempt will be determined by the court." By the time Harold arrived, the officers had catalogued not only the sideboard, but 3 other antique pieces in the van, along with several boxes of smaller items, including, to my profound relief, Richard's watch collection, which had been packed but not yet sold. "This is harassment," Everett argued, but his voice lacked conviction. "We were moving items within the family, not selling them." "The invoice in the van says otherwise," Harold replied mildly, "as does the documented pattern of sales over the past 3 weeks." The confrontation ended with the police providing me a property receipt for the items they documented, a case number for the potential theft, and a court date for the following week. The movers left empty-handed, clearly relieved to be out of the situation. As Harold and I walked back to our cars, I caught Everett watching me from the doorway, his expression unreadable. "You realize this ends any possibility of an amicable settlement," Harold murmured. "There was never going to be an amicable settlement," I replied. "Not with people who believe they're entitled to take whatever they want, regardless of law or basic decency." Harold studied me thoughtfully. "You know, most clients in your position confronting a child's betrayal, would be devastated, maybe even willing to sacrifice justice for the sake of family peace. I'm devastated, I admitted quietly. But I learned long ago on the bench that justice and peace aren't always compatible. Sometimes you have to choose. And you've chosen justice. I've chosen truth. The truth that my son has become someone who would steal from his mother while she recovered from surgery. Who would try to warehouse her in a nursing home to gain control of her assets? I looked back at the house. My house, with its beautiful bones and neglected garden. I can't pretend that isn't the reality, no matter how painful it is. That night, back at Luisa's house, I sorted through the photos Zoe had sent of my remaining possessions, cataloging each item with its approximate value and provenance. It was meticulous work, the kind of detailed documentation I had often required in my courtroom. My phone chimed with a message from an unfamiliar number. Judge Adkins, it's Desmond Phillips from the community garden meeting at the clinic yesterday. Vivian mentioned you might be interested in the legal aid program we're setting up for patients. I'd like to discuss it over coffee if you're available. I vaguely remembered the distinguished gentleman who'd given the presentation. Tall, with salt and pepper hair and intelligent eyes, a retired literature professor who volunteered at the clinic teaching English to immigrants. We'd spoken briefly after the meeting, finding common ground in our belief in community service. I hesitated before replying. My life was complicated enough without adding social engagements. Yet there was something appealing about discussing something other than my personal legal battles. Thank you for the invitation, I wrote back. I'd be happy to discuss the program. Tomorrow at 2 p.m. at Café Lucinda near the clinic? His response came quickly. Perfect. I'll see you then. Looking forward to it. Setting the phone aside, I returned to my cataloging. By midnight, I had documented over 300 items still in the house, worth approximately $500,000 collectively. Antiques, artwork, jewelry, and family heirlooms. Combined with what had already been sold or recovered, my personal property in the house represented nearly $750,000 in assets, separate from the house itself. No wonder Everett and Cassandra had been so eager to get me out of the way. They'd been sitting on a treasure trove they considered ripe for plundering. As I prepared for bed in Luisa's spare room, I thought about the coming weeks. The hearing for contempt charges, the potential criminal investigation, the ongoing battle to recover what had been taken. It would be exhausting, painful, possibly very public, if Everett fought back aggressively. Yet for the first time since finding my belongings on the lawn, I felt something close to peace. Not because the situation had improved, if anything, it had grown more complex, but because I had reclaimed my sense of purpose. The clarity that had guided me on the bench for 30 years had returned, focusing my mind and steadying my resolve. My son had declared war on me, believing me too weak and vulnerable to fight back. He was about to discover just how wrong he was. Café Lucinda was tucked between a bookstore and a vintage clothing shop, its atmosphere warm and inviting with local artwork adorning the walls. Desmond Phillips was already seated at a corner table when I arrived, a stack of papers neatly arranged beside his coffee cup. He stood as I approached, his smile genuine. Judge Adkins, thank you for coming. Marlene, please, I said, settling into the chair across from him. I'm not on the bench anymore. Then I insist on Des. He pushed a folder toward me. This is the outline for the legal aid program. We're hoping to provide basic assistance for clinic patients. Many are immigrants or low-income seniors facing eviction, benefit issues, or healthcare access problems. I scanned the proposal, impressed by its thoroughness. This is excellent work. You have experience in nonprofit development? In my previous life, I chaired the humanities department at the university. Grant writing and program development became unexpected skills. He watched me review the document with thoughtful eyes. Vivian mentioned you might be willing to lend your expertise. Having a former federal judge involved would give the program significant credibility. For the next hour, we discussed the legal aid initiative, identifying potential funding sources and community partners. The conversation flowed easily, shifting from professional matters to books we'd both enjoyed, to the changing landscape of Tucson over the decades. I've kept you much longer than planned, Des said finally, glancing at his watch. But I've enjoyed the conversation immensely. As have I. I was surprised to realize it was true. For a few hours, I'd been completely absorbed in something beyond my personal troubles. Would you consider dinner next week? To continue our discussion about the program, of course? His eyes crinkled at the corners, warmth and a hint of nervousness in his expression. I hesitated. It had been years since I'd considered anything resembling a date. After Richard died, I'd poured everything into raising Everett and my career. There had been a few brief relationships, but nothing that had tempted me away from my independent life. I'd like that, I heard myself say. Though I should warn you, my life is rather complicated at the moment. I'm aware of some of it, he admitted. Vivian mentioned you're staying with a neighbor due to a family dispute. I don't need details, but I want you to know it doesn't scare me away. As I left the cafe, my phone rang with Harold's number. The DA's office has opened an investigation, he said without preamble. The detective assigned to your case found evidence that Everett and Cassandra have been systematically selling off assets for months, not just yours. They've apparently been draining their business accounts as well. What does that mean? It means they're either desperate or planning to run. Either way, it's escalated from a civil dispute to a potential criminal matter. He paused. There's more. Judge Martinez has scheduled an emergency hearing for tomorrow regarding the contempt charges. She's not happy about the continued removal of property from the house. I'll be there. One last thing. Spencer Williams called again. Their settlement offer has improved substantially. They're now offering to return the house, all remaining possessions, and $200,000 in compensation for items already sold. I did a quick mental calculation. That's still far less than what they've taken. Yes, but it would avoid a protracted legal battle, and potentially criminal charges for Everett, my son. My only child. Despite everything, some maternal instinct still flinched at the thought of him facing criminal prosecution. Let me think about it, I said finally. I'll call you in the morning. That evening, as Louisa and I prepared dinner, I found myself unusually quiet, my mind turning over the settlement offer. You look troubled, Louisa observed, chopping cilantro for her homemade salsa. Bad news? I explained the situation, laying out the options as I would have for a jury. What would you do? I asked when I'd finished. If it were your son? Louisa was silent for a long moment, her knife stilled on the cutting board. When my Roberto was young, maybe 20, he stole from my purse to buy drugs. Not once, many times. Her voice was matter of fact. I caught him, called the police myself. He spent 6 months in jail. That must have been devastating. It was the hardest thing I ever did. Harder than burying Carlos. She resumed chopping. But Roberto came out clean, got help. Now he has a good job in Phoenix, a beautiful family. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is let someone face consequences. I nodded, struck by her wisdom. Did he understand why you did it? Not for years. He was angry, felt betrayed. She scraped the cilantro into the salsa. But when his own son was born, he came to me and said, Mama, I understand now. You loved me enough to let me hit bottom. We ate dinner on her back patio, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. My phone buzzed with a text from Zoe. Dad and Mom were fighting again. She's threatening to leave him if he gives you back the money. I think they're both scared. I stared at the message, a piece of the puzzle falling into place. Cassandra's aggressive materialism, her apparent desperation for money, it suddenly made sense. She wasn't just greedy. She was frightened. Something had gone very wrong with Everett's business, and they were both spiraling. Later that night, I called Harold. I've decided against the settlement, I said, but I want to propose an alternative. The next morning, I dressed carefully for court in a navy suit I'd managed to retrieve from my house. In the mirror, I saw not just a wronged mother, but the judge I'd been for 30 years. Composed, determined, unswayed by emotion when principles were at stake. Judge Martinez's courtroom was more crowded than for our previous hearing. News of a former federal judge battling her attorney's son over elder financial abuse had apparently spread through Tucson's legal community. Everett and Cassandra sat at the respondents' table, both looking markedly worse than 2 weeks ago. Cassandra's designer outfit had been replaced by a more subdued ensemble, the flash of her usual jewelry absent. Everett's face was haggard, his shoulders slumped. Judge Martinez called the court to order, her expression severe. I've reviewed the police report regarding continued removal of property from the residence in direct violation of this court's injunction. Mr. Williams, would your client care to explain? Williams rose, his usual smooth confidence diminished. Your Honor, my clients believed they were relocating items within the family, not alienating assets covered by the injunction. A claim contradicted by the invoice found in the moving van, Judge Martinez noted dryly, and by documentation of previous sales of similar items. She turned to Harold. Mr. Tucker, I understand your client has a proposal for resolving this matter? Harold stood. Yes, Your Honor. Judge Adkins proposes the following terms: full restoration of all property and financial assets taken by the respondents, with the exception of $100,000 to be placed in a trust for her granddaughter's education. Additionally, the respondents must vacate her residence within 30 days and agree to a permanent restraining order prohibiting them from contacting Judge Adkins except through counsel. Williams leaned over to confer with Everett and Cassandra, their whispered conversation increasingly heated. Judge Martinez watched with thinning patience. Your Honor, Williams finally said, my clients find these terms challenging to meet. Much of the property in question has already been sold or otherwise disposed of. Then they can provide financial compensation equal to the appraised value, Harold replied smoothly. That's just it. They don't currently have the liquid assets to— Enough. Judge Martinez's voice cut through the courtroom. Mr. and Mrs. Adkins, stand. Everett and Cassandra rose, neither meeting my eyes. I find you in contempt of this court's previous order. You had clear instructions not to remove or alienate assets from the property in question, yet you deliberately continued to do so. She fixed them with a stern gaze. I'm inclined to refer this matter to the district attorney for criminal prosecution. However, in deference to Judge Adkins's proposal, I will give you one opportunity to avoid that outcome. She outlined terms nearly identical to my proposal, adding several punitive measures of her own, including mandatory financial counseling and community service. You have 48 hours to begin compliance, documented by an independent inventory specialist who will catalog all remaining items in the residence. Failure to cooperate will result in immediate criminal referral. She banged her gavel. We're adjourned until next week, when I'll review your progress. As we filed out of the courtroom, I found myself face to face with Everett in the hallway. For the first time since this ordeal began, he looked directly at me, his expression a complex mixture of anger, fear, and something that might have been shame. Why didn't you take the settlement? He asked, his voice low. It would have been cleaner for everyone. Because some things matter more than money or convenience, Everett. Integrity, consequences, truth. I studied the face of the boy I'd raised, trying to reconcile it with the man before me. What happened to you? The values I taught you. What happened to those? He looked away. You don't understand. The business was failing. Cassie's family cut her off. The debts just kept growing. So you decided to steal from your mother? To try to force me into a nursing home? It wasn't like that. It started small, just borrowing from your accounts temporarily. Then things got worse, and Cassie said— He stopped abruptly. Said what? That I was old? Expendable? That I wouldn't fight back? His silence was answer enough. You made a choice, Everett. Multiple choices. Now you'll face the consequences, but with a path forward that doesn't include prison, if you comply with the court's orders. And if we can't pay it all back? Some of it's gone, Mom. Then you'll need to work out a payment plan with the court, sell your assets, downsize your lifestyle. Take responsibility for once. As I turned to leave, he called after me. Will you ever forgive me? I paused, not looking back. I don't know. That will depend on your actions from this point forward, not your words. The following month brought dramatic changes. Under court supervision, Everett and Cassandra vacated my house, returning what remained of my possessions and providing documentation of what had been sold. Harold negotiated a structured repayment plan for the missing funds, secured by liens against their remaining assets. Meanwhile, my life developed new rhythms. The work at the clinic expanded as the legal aid program took shape, with Des and I co-chairing the initiative. Our professional collaboration evolved into something more personal. Dinners, concerts at the Botanical Garden, long conversations on Luis's patio under the stars. At 70, he was thoughtful, kind, and carried his intelligence lightly. Everything my late husband had been, yet entirely his own person. Luisa refused my offer to return to my house once it was vacant, insisting I stay through the holidays. "You need time to cleanse that place of bad energy," she declared. "Besides, I've gotten used to having you around." On a crisp December morning, Zoe arrived at Luisa's door, suitcase in hand. "I can't live with them anymore," she announced. "I've applied for early admission to Arizona State. I can finish high school online while taking freshman courses, but I need somewhere to stay until then." I glanced at Luisa, who nodded almost imperceptibly. "You're always welcome," I told my granddaughter. "But have you discussed this with your parents?" "Dad knows. He didn't fight it." She set her suitcase down. "He's different now. Quieter. Mom left last week, moved back to her family in California. I think he's actually relieved." The news of Cassandra's departure wasn't surprising. Once the money and status were gone, there was little to hold her to a failing marriage and a disgraced husband. "How do you feel about all that?" I asked Zoe as we settled in Luisa's living room. "Sad, angry, relieved," she shrugged. "Dad's talking about selling their house, getting an apartment. Starting over, he says. Starting over." The phrase echoed in my mind as I helped Zoe arrange her belongings in the small guest room I'd been using, Luisa having insisted I take her son's old room to accommodate my granddaughter. That evening, the three of us prepared dinner together, Zoe eagerly learning Luisa's recipes while sharing her college plans. Des joined us, bringing wine for the adults and engaging Zoe in a spirited discussion about literature. As I looked around the table, my granddaughter, my neighbor-turned-friend, this kind man who'd entered my life unexpectedly, I realized that what Everett had intended as an ending had become a beginning. In trying to discard me, he had inadvertently freed me from the isolation I hadn't even recognized in my carefully ordered life. The next day, I finally returned to my house, not to move back yet, but to begin reclaiming the space. The emptier rooms, stripped of items Everett and Cassandra had sold, felt oddly liberating rather than depressing. An opportunity to decide what I truly wanted in this next chapter. Standing in the garden, surveying the neglected roses and dried-out lawn, I pulled out my phone and called a local landscaping company. It was time to revitalize this place, to make it truly mine again. As I walked through each room, I found myself making plans. The formal dining room would become a study for Zoe. The guest suite would be perfect for when Luisa wanted to stay over. The overly formal living room would be transformed into a comfortable space for Des's book club and our legal aid program meetings. This house that had been the site of my greatest betrayal would become something new, a home again, but different, filled with chosen family rather than those connected merely by blood. Everett had attempted to erase me, to reduce me to a problem to be warehoused away. Instead, he had inadvertently catalyzed my renaissance. At 67, I had found new purpose, new connections, even new love. The woman who had been Judge Adkins for 30 years was becoming someone else, someone perhaps more authentic than the careful, isolated person I had been. There would be more challenges ahead. The legal proceedings would continue for months. Rebuilding a relationship with Everett, if that was even possible, would take years and might never be complete. But for the first time since finding my belongings on the lawn that awful day, I felt not just determination, but genuine hope. As I locked up the house, my phone buzzed with a message from Des. "Dinner tonight? I've found a new Thai place that looks promising." I smiled, typing back, "Looking forward to it. And afterward, perhaps you can help me plan the new garden." The Iron Judge was still there when I needed her strength, but she was no longer all that I was. Life, it seemed, had more chapters for me than I'd imagined possible. If you've been through betrayal like mine and felt that life was over, remember that new beginnings are always possible. Subscribe to my channel for more stories of resilience and renewal, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss my next video, where I'll share how I rebuilt my life after losing everything.